Welcome to today's explainer. You know, your SIEM can ingest millions of security events every single day. We're talking firewalls locking traffic, endpoints flashing alerts, cloud trails generating just endless streams of text. But here's the hard truth we uncover in today's source material. Executives absolutely do not need millions of events. They need to know what matters, what actually changed, what's currently at risk, and crucially, what action needs to happen right now. The real transformation in modern security ops, it's not just moving from raw logs to some pretty dashboard. It's moving from logs to logic, literally turning chaotic telemetry into crisp, executive decisions. Let's get into it.
So, we are taking a very structured journey today to solve this data overload problem. We're going to cover the data overload problem itself, normalizing and enriching that data, correlating the behavior, scoring the business risk, layering in grounded AI reasoning, and then we'll wrap up with the complete intelligence pipeline.
All right, let's start with Section 1. The core challenge faced by every modern security operations center today, the data overload problem.
If you've ever worked in a modern SOC, you know that identity data, endpoint telemetry, and cloud activity don't just trickle in, they pour in like a massive, chaotic storm. And honestly, anyone who's had to stare at that flood of low-level alerts knows the very real pain of alert fatigue. But the fundamental challenge isn't actually just the volume, it's the language. All these signals, they have entirely different schemas, completely different priorities, and varying levels of reliability. A single failed login floating in this ocean means absolutely nothing on its own. So our overarching goal here is bridging that massive gap. We need to get from that stormy left side of disjointed, noisy events over to the right side, clear, actionable executive decisions.
Moving right along to Section 2, normalizing and enriching data, which is all about building a common language.
To cross that bridge we just talked about, the source material maps out a really elegant 5-step pipeline. Because, let's be real, you can't just dump raw logs into an analytics engine, cross your fingers, and hope the machine figures it out. No way. You have to normalize, enrich, correlate, score, and finally measure the impact. Let's zoom in on that first step.
Think of normalization like a universal translator for a dozen complex dialects. By forcing all that random telemetry, whether it came from an intern's laptop, a perimeter firewall, or a huge cloud provider, into a standardized JSON event model, the analytics layer can finally read things seamlessly. We're capturing the core structured data here, the source IP, the host, the result, and a base risk score. Now our system actually has a common, unified language to reason over.
But getting a common language is really just the baseline. The actual magic, that happens with enrichment. Think about it. A plain login from an IP address is just a standard, boring event. But what if we pull in context from your asset inventory, identity directories, and threat intelligence feeds? Suddenly, that login from a known malicious IP address targeting a highly privileged account on a crown jewel server, well, that's no longer just a log. It's a blaring alarm. Context is the ultimate multiplier. It takes a basic data point and upgrades it into vital intelligence.
Okay, Section 3. Once we have that common language and some deep context, we need to correlate attack behavior. This is where we start connecting the dots.
This timeline perfectly illustrates why treating security events independently is a recipe for disaster. If you look at these in isolation, a few failed authentications might just look like a glitch, right? Or maybe somebody forgot their Monday morning password. But follow the timeline. A failed auth, followed by a sudden successful login, then an MFA anomaly, privilege escalation, and finally an unusual outbound connection. Actually, scratch that earlier thought. This is definitely not a harmless glitch. This is a clear, step-by-step narrative of a total system compromise.
To actually catch that specific sequence in real time, we need rock-solid logic. Check out the correlation engine at work here. If failed logins for a user exceed 20 within 5 minutes, and a successful login happens within 10 minutes, and the source IP has a malicious reputation, and the target asset criticality is high, then we raise a priority 1 incident. This right here is where a SIEM truly becomes a logic engine. We are correlating across time, identity, asset criticality, and behavior. And the output? It's no longer a massive, unreadable log file. It is a highly confident declaration of a probable compromise.
All right, on to Section 4, scoring business risk. Because once we find the attacks, we have to prioritize them.
Executives absolutely need prioritization. They do not care about alert volume. And this specific risk formula acts as a really powerful anchor to give them exactly what they need. Risk,
equals threat severity multiplied by asset criticality, multiplied by exposure, multiplied by confidence. Now, I know that sounds like a mouthful, but this isn't just math for math's sake. This exact formula is the mechanism that filters thousands of those technical alerts down into just a handful of critical, business-relevant security stories.
Let's look at the striking difference this actually makes in practice. A traditional technical output shouting 27 alerts generated means absolutely nothing to a business leader. It's just noise. But look at the right side. An executive intelligence output that declares one probable privileged account compromise was detected, a production application was potentially exposed, containment is recommended. See the difference? That answers every single question they have. What happened? How serious is it? What business assets are affected? And what action do we take? Executive intelligence answers all four. Raw alert volume answers 0.
Next up, Section 5. How do we consistently generate those beautiful summaries? Let's talk about grounded AI reasoning and where it fits in.
Generative AI is a real game changer when it comes to translating technical evidence into a concise narrative. But, and this is a big but, only if it's instructed correctly. By using a grounded prompt like we see here, commanding the AI to summarize the top incidents, group related alerts into campaigns, identify affected business-critical assets, and recommend defensive actions without inventing facts, we force it to reason over complex data super efficiently. It literally cites the underlying events rather than just guessing.
This point is so absolutely crucial that it gets its own slide. AI explains the evidence. It should never manufacture it. By keeping deterministic detection underneath the AI layer and strictly forcing the model to cite verified telemetry, we prevent those crazy hallucinations you hear about. The AI is acting as the ultimate analyst and translator here, but its intelligence is always grounded in mathematically proven, normalized, and correlated log data. Okay, Section 6. We've built all the individual pieces. Now let's bring it all together and look at the end-to-end intelligence architecture.
Zooming out, we can trace this entire operational lifecycle, the whole shebang. Raw telemetry sources flow into collection, and then push immediately into normalization and enrichment to create that common language we talked about. From there, the detection and correlation logic finds the attacks, handing them right off to the risk engine to weight the business impact and form an incident graph. Only then does grounded AI reasoning step in, which ultimately produces the executive intelligence and triggers automated response. Every single layer here has a distinct, absolutely vital job.
And the ultimate destination of that entire pipeline is a clean, powerful executive dashboard. What a relief it is to move from that chaotic storm of raw data into this, right? Metrics like active critical incidents, risk trends, and control effectiveness, these aren't just arbitrary numbers. They answer exactly what requires attention right now. Is our organizational exposure increasing? Which of our defenses are actually working? Executives can finally see the risk and the required actions without ever having to read a single raw log.
Now, to make this system truly safe in the real world, the architecture relies on one brilliant design principle: a strict separation of powers. Deterministic controls decide what is allowed, analytics decide what is suspicious, AI explains what the evidence means, but humans, and literally only humans, approve high-impact actions. We're leveraging automation to do all the heavy lifting of reasoning and synthesis, but human judgment remains the critical final trigger.
So what does this all mean? The future of security operations isn't about generating more alerts, it's entirely about better reasoning. When raw telemetry successfully becomes correlated evidence, and that evidence becomes prioritized risk, and that risk translates into clear business intelligence, well, everything changes. So I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought for your own organization. Is your team endlessly reacting to a flood of alerts, or have you actually built the architecture to make faster, smarter decisions? That ultimately is the real journey from logs to logic. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.